Greetings, Corpse Clubbers, and welcome to another episode of Corpse Club, the official podcast for DailyDead.com. My name is Heather Wixson, and I am thrilled this week to be joined by none other than Osgood Perkins, the director behind Gretel and Hansel, which is officially now out in theaters this weekend. Osgood, thanks so much for joining us this week. I am absolutely thrilled to speak with you.
Thanks for bothering to have me.
Are you kidding me? I have been such a huge fan of all of your work over the last 2 years. So this for me is really an honor. So really, I appreciate you taking the time.
My absolute pleasure.
Fantastic. So I want to jump into Gretel and Hansel real quick, and then I would love to talk a little bit sort of your body of work as well. But what was it about this story in particular that you sort of felt that was right for the picking in terms of adapting it? Because I think what you've done here is completely subverted any sort of expectations going into it and really created something special and very unique in terms of the original lore and how you've been able to sort of change it into something very different.
Well, when it came to me, Hansel and Gretel has always been a favorite of mine, and somewhere in the sort of recesses of my brain, I think I idly daydreamed and fantasized about one day making a movie out of it. So I suppose it was sort of the universe saying, all right, take a swing and see what happens. The best news about it for me was kind of maybe what some people think would be the worst news, which is that everybody knows it. And everybody knows what happens, and everybody kind of knows what to expect. And I felt like that was only going to help the experience for everybody, because the fact is that these fairy tales, which we've all absorbed as kids, and as kids we all absorb them, and then as adults we sort of think of them as something that's like no longer applicable, or we've gone past them or something. But my belief is that they live in your guts like chewing gum or something, right, that never gets properly digested and always kind of like sits there. And so I felt like it was like a head start. It's no mistake that 99% of all movies these days, successful ones for sure, are based on something that everybody already knows, whether that's overt as we are, where our title is instantly recognizable, or it's something that's sort of a little bit more slightly harder to see. Although when you look at something like Joker or you look at something like Irishman, it's like, yeah, these are movies that come from other movies and that come from other stories, and that we're familiar with them before we sit down. So in making a dreadful movie for kids, I felt what better place to start than with the kind of ultimate dreadful story for kids.
No, absolutely. And I love the fact that, you mentioned, of course, sort of doing something different. In this script in particular, what I really enjoyed about it, for as much as you changed things with Hansel and Gretel as characters, there's also some really interesting stuff with the witch, which for me, I just think adds so much to this. And I was wondering if you could talk sort of about the collaborative process with Rob Hayes on this. Because I think the way that you guys frame this in terms of going into these characters and approaching them from a completely new aspect really adds a lot. And again, it's stuff that we've just never really seen before. Because the witch for me has always been sort of a one-note character, and you guys really add some great layers to her here.
Yeah, for me, the sort of the archetypal touchstone for that kind of thing is always going to be Darth Vader, who, for me, when I was 6 years old and he puts his hand out and he says, "Luke, I'm your father," was probably the most kind of elementally both sort of uplifting and disastrous revelation I could have really never seen coming. This quality of, oh, he's a person, he's a dad, and he's not happy about how things are going, and in fact he's actually quite heartbroken, and that was something that came out more and more as the sort of Star Wars saga unfolded itself, and it's easily the most interesting and sort of salient thing I think about those movies. And for me, it boils down to, the old expression of any villain is just the star of their own movie, right? The villain is the star of their own story. And to take that one step further, it's that any villain is the star of their own sad story or their own tragedy. And obviously, again, to reference the most successful movie of the year, Joker is just really a portraiture of that, the quality of these people who become these iconic villains, these iconic monsters, are broken people at their center. And that, to me, is never going to be uninteresting. That's always going to be sort of the thing that I most want to attach to. And like I say, it started for me with Darth Vader. It continues on and on and on and on. And so for this movie, one of the things that was definitely most important for me was that we give some context to what is this woman doing, that she's gone to this trouble and that she continues to go back to this place over and over again, where eating a child is the only thing that's going to work for her. And what kind of a horrible existence is this? So the once you kind of lock into that intention, you know, if your intention is a good seed, then what grows out of it is really verdant. And we managed to sort of find that. And then, of course, Alice Krige, who's flawless, was ready to go to all those places. So that aspect, kind of bringing the witch into humanity, was essential.
No, absolutely. And I think also what's interesting, too, is this very much is a story about women and about how society views women in particular. And again, I was not expecting that. I was sort of expecting two kids show up at a witch's house and, you know, the game is afoot to see when she's going to eat them. But it becomes so much more than that. And I wanted to talk a little about that because I felt like, you know, for as much as this is sort of a period piece movie, you know, about sort of this you know, timeless era where, you know, it's not quite a definitive time, but yet it's classically framed. It's still exceedingly relevant to a lot of the things that, you know, women are facing today. I really appreciate that because I just, again, when I talk about the unsurprised movies, it's really, you know, delivered just that.
Yeah, you know, the coming of age aspect seemed, you know, it kind of wasn't really there when the project came to me, and it was something that it was really important to me that we developed, and it became important to the studio that we're going to lean into the sort of coming of age and the quality of an origin story of somebody, because, you know, the power that comes with becoming yourself is that's like the human trip, right? Like, whether it's me saying that or it's Carl Jung saying it far better than anybody, especially me, could ever say it. It's like the object of human life is individuation, right? It's to become what we are. And so I think that the story presented that opportunity because you're putting this child into such a crucible of horror and just nastiness and just the reality of what a hard, cruel, unloving world it really is out there, whether it's 1,000 years ago or 10,000 years ago or 50 years ago or today. I thought that contextually to be able to sort of track a young woman as she starts to become herself is easily is kind of the most salient, grounded, and deliberate thing we could have tried. Otherwise, it's like you say, it's sort of an exercise in what's going to happen and what's going to jump out of where. And we stayed away from what's going to jump out of where. I'm not interested in what's going to jump out of where. I'm interested in kind of watching somebody have that sort of moment or those moments along the way of the process of, oh, I'm somebody. I'm going to be my own person. I'm not going to be under the thumb of this or that, or under the thumb of the expectation of culture or society or gender or whatever it is. The excitement that's inherent in becoming is really something. I have a 15-year-old son, and he's at a place now in his life and his development where it's astonishing who he is, you know, and I've known him since he was an infant, obviously, and now he's becoming himself, and it's one of nature's most sort of beautiful offerings. And so I think that the fact that we were able to incorporate that into this fun-ish, dark-ish movie became really important.
Absolutely. And you of course mentioned Alice Krige, who has been a favorite of mine ever since I was really little. I had the good fortune of having a single mom who took me to movies that were very inappropriate for a toddler. But I remember she scared like the crap out of me when I saw Ghost Story, and continued to scare me throughout my childhood with that movie. And then, you know, of course, as an adult now, I see the sadness that sort of comes with that role that she played in that film. But as soon as I knew she was involved with this movie, I was like, oh my God, I was so excited. And of course, obviously, Sophia, who has really just been on this fantastic trajectory with her career as of late, is so astonishingly great in this movie. Not that I didn't think she had it in her, but there's some really lovely moments to Gretel in this movie that you guys explore incredibly well in terms of her sort of grappling with these issues and the weight that, society sort of put upon her in terms of her needing to care for Hansel. And of course, Samuel as well is just absolutely great in this as well. Can you talk about finding this core group of actors and what it was that you saw in them that made them a perfect fit for this film?
Yeah, it's funny because obviously I've talked about this movie a little bit in the last few days, and so you become sort of aware of things, and something that happened in the casting was that we kind of ended up getting all three people at the stage of life that they should be at for their characters, as you singled out. Sophia's kind of in that place, like I said, of becoming what she's going to be, and so deservedly so. I mean, she's such a deeply interesting actor and such a transformative presence. One of these very, very, very rare cases where the camera turns itself onto somebody and the relationship between the camera and the actor is like a very special one. I don't think it happens often, but the camera reads Sophia in a really great way, and I think that's what everybody's responded to with her, whether they would describe it as such or not. But so she was right there in that kind of becoming place, which was important for the feeling, the vibe of Gretel. Sammy, conversely, is brand new and completely innocent and enthusiastic, and everything is fine and great because everything is new. Everything's the first time. And he's he's such a smart, such a brave kid. He's a chess master, and he's a sort of inexhaustible, and he's 8. He's 8 years old, so he's still afraid of stuff. He was afraid of things that we were doing in the movie. He was afraid of certain characters. He was afraid of certain lines of action in the screenplay. He would point at them and not say them to me. He'd say, then there's this part, and he'd run his finger under the letters and sort of show me a sentence that I'd written, and he didn't want to say it out loud. So he was perfect where he was. And then Alice, of course, like you say, someone who's expressed sadness and grief and loss and kind of personal, self-awareness and is a teacher of sorts to these other younger people. I mean, I know for a fact because Sophia's really open about it. I mean, working with Alice like this was an invaluable learning experience. And a lot of the time what I tried to do in their dialogue scenes was really run them with 2 cameras all the time, sort of one camera facing one way, one camera facing the other way, and then having just the 2 of them face to face, having actual conversations, which felt like learning experiences. And I ended up using, footage from everybody's side, but we never did anybody off camera as it were. So I was always kind of like wanted to make sure that I was actually seeing Sophia get from Alice. So, you get lucky, really, frankly. When we were thinking about Gretel's, we didn't think that Sophia was necessarily going to be available or interested or would take our calls or anything like that. But quite the opposite. She kind of leapt at it and made a really great audition tape and was just exactly right from the get-go. And, a guy like me, you just get lucky. And the stars align and the angels decide to kind of tap you on the shoulder and say, okay, you get one this time. And that happened here.
No, definitely. And I think, too, on a visual level, there's some really beautiful things in this movie, very haunting at times, but also just sort of breathtaking in a very unusual way, because I think there's the production design, of course, of the witch's house is just real. I love how everything sort of feels weird and askew and just not quite right, because it fits, obviously, with sort of the overlying themes of the film. And I love, there's the sequences in the White Room that are just, absolutely, I was holding my breath at certain moments because they were just so beautifully horrifying. And I was wondering if you talk a little about sort of the craft elements of this film in terms of, you know, working with your cinematographers and your production designer, and sort of establishing the visual style of this movie, because there's some really gorgeous things going on in this film.
Thanks very much. We, you know, when you're working from highly recognizable source material, you're tasked with both with honoring and then kind of evolving. And so we wanted to find the happy place between those two things. And you know, for me, I said to the designers and to people, it's like there's a few places in this movie where everybody who knows Hansel and Gretel, and that's everybody on Earth, is going to say, there's going to be moments where we're going to say, okay, here comes the witch's house. What's the witch's house going to be like? And I said, if when we turn the camera on the witch's house and it's not something that they've not seen or that they weren't expecting, we lose. Let's go home. So the idea from the get-go was to sort of design things that felt unexpected. The costumes were borrowed from sort of early Soviet sort of worker, sort of Soviet, you know, utilitarian uniforms was how we approached that. And the houses are kind of A-framed and low slung and almost post and beam, kind of modern, just to sort of create its own world. I wanted really this world to be its own world that was related to no other time or epoch or place, or no country. It was just the place of the story, which felt to me very honest in terms of telling a fairy tale, which, you know, sort of happened. It's like a fairy tale happens in a fairy tale. You know what I mean? Like there's no, it doesn't require external context. And so we strove to sort of make our movie look like our movie and only our movie. So when, you know, I kept being asked every day by the production and the assistant directors, how many extras do you want today in the village? I said 0. And they said, well, but what about I said 0. Every movie like this has a village full of people they're selling chickens, or they've got a steaming pot of something, or there's a washerwoman with a thing. I don't want none of that. There should be nobody anyplace, because this is not that. And so once you kind of get everybody on board with a kind of an elemental approach, that's when you really see the eyes in your department heads light up, and everybody kind of gets it, you know. And so that was our intention, was to make something that was neither modern nor old, and owed kind of nothing to anything else. It was completely its own universe.
Absolutely. And if I could be silly sort of for a minute, but every good witch has a cat. And I absolutely love the hairless cat in this movie, which becomes its own little character at times. You know, everybody always says, like, never work with children, never work with animals. You do both here. How much of a star did that cat end up becoming? Because it was so off-putting at first, and by the end, I absolutely loved that cat. I was absolutely enamored by it.
Well, it's so funny because, like, we brought them onto the set, and Sophia said, "Oh, I have hairless cats at home," and it was like, "Oh, wow. All right. Well, we were trying to sort of throw you a curve, but I guess you sleep with these on a daily basis." We had a couple of cats, and they were only sort of like vaguely professional. These cats, they weren't like, it wasn't the kind of thing where we had someone with a clicker and they would go where we wanted them to go. In fact, there's a couple of cuts in the movie which are completely unlikely. Like the cat will move in one direction, and then I managed to cut and make it look like I got him to jump across a bed on purpose. And I can only say that that's movie magic, that the cat really did whatever it wanted to do. But again, it was textural, you know, it was part of the fabric. And I feel like the hairless cats were sort of closer in feeling to the Siamese cats in Lady and the Tramp, that kind of have that sort of vaguely ugly feeling to them, even though they're obviously quite beautiful in their way too. But hairless cats, you know, it's like every other cat in the movie has hair in it. How about we have a hairless one? It's a little bit, I hate to be facile about it, but when you sort of lock into that, this is our universe thing, decisions like that become sort of obvious.
No, definitely. When you mentioned sort of kind of there's sort of a devious quality to them as well, where you're just kind of like, are you watching them? Like, what's your ultimate plan?
Exactly.
Like, I love dogs, but cats, like you always get a sense that they're planning something that they're just not telling you. So I think it was very off-putting in a really great way.
Absolutely.
Your career has been really interesting to me over the years. I've loved sort of watching this evolution from, starting with I'm the Pretty Thing That Lives in the House, which is this, sort of haunting mood piece. The Blackcoat's Daughter, which ended up being one of my very favorite movies of that year. And then now seeing what you're doing with Gretel and Hansel, and it really struck me as I was kind of going through your filmography, like, that you're out there telling these really bold stories from a female perspective. And you do it in a way that really feels authentic. And I'm curious when you talk about that in terms of sort of your evolution as a storyteller. And what is it that drives you in terms of the films that you enjoy making and the stories that you enjoy telling?
Well, it's funny. The order of things is a little mixed up. The first movie was The Blackcoat's Daughter. It didn't appear for people until afterwards. Distribution being weird, and no problem. And Netflix being kind of on top. Immediate. It's kind of like an immediate, instant gratification thing. So it started for me with Blackcoat's Daughter. It really started with just what kind of a movie do I want to see? Like what if I'm going to do something, I want it to be the kind of thing that I would care to watch. And not so much that it was a horror picture, which I like horror movies as much as anybody else does. I'm not fanatical about them. I don't seek them out. The beautiful ones are, or I should say the good ones are the beautiful ones, or the good ones are the sad ones. Let the Right One In or The Strangers, for instance, are both sort of disturbing and heartbreaking movies, and I really it really resonated with me that the kind of feeling of mournfulness and loss were experiential realities for me personally. And so it became kind of, in the old-fashioned way of thinking of things, write what you know. I was writing what I knew, and putting them in the sort of the guise or the kind of the vestments of horror movies gives you this kind of unbelievable freedom. I think one of the things about horror movies is that they everything is okay. Like everything is permissible. The ultra real, the ultra unreal, the supernatural, the terribly natural. The sort of everything within the poles is welcome, and there's a potential for glamour and beauty and poetry and obliqueness and all these things which I think are just make everything, just make the world kind of better. And the fact that horror movies are kind of always about what we don't know, what we can't know, what we can't see, what we can't fully understand, what's hidden from us. And so I think kind of, whether I did it on purpose or not, I can't say, but using female protagonists, I think for me has helped me to stay in the place of curiosity and stay in the place of not knowing and stay in the place of wondering what's being hidden from me. Because, it's like as much as we may have successful relationships and love and all of this, there's still always, at least for me, going to be an elemental quality of mystery when it comes to women and how the female soul and spirit operates, because it's not the same as the way my soul and spirit operates. And most of the time, I got to say, I prefer the way y'all's spirits and souls operate. And so it's kind of like a combination of both wanting to be mystified by the characters I'm dealing with, not wanting to be kind of pat or assumptive, but rather to be kind of like, I wonder if it would be like this. And I've seen sort of like, oh, my mom used to do this, or my girlfriend used to do this, or my daughter used to do this, or my wife used to do, like that kind of sort of guesswork. I think it just adds an element of mystery. And then on top of it, dread, fear, attraction, all the kind of really salient and vital forces that you want working in your thing. I feel like if I was using male protagonists that felt like me, I would the temptation to kind of know too much would be dull.
Right. No, absolutely. And I know we're getting close on time, but I'm somebody who's a big believer that whenever you do anything creative, it's a very transformative process where, you kind of leave a part of yourself in there and you take a part of it with you. And I'm curious, looking at what you were able to do with Gretel and Hansel and just change things up in such a beautiful way. What was sort of the biggest takeaway for you from that experience, whether it was something that sort of, hit you personally, maybe professionally, maybe it was sort of a mixture of both?
Good question. It's sort of, maybe it's not the most fascinating answer, but in this profession, which I'm very new to, and the first two movies I made were very much kind of my own invention, my own content, came entirely from the fountain of myself. And for the most part, almost entirely, I was left to do what I wanted to do and just do it as I wanted. And no one kind of was there to say, you might consider this, or you can't do that, or something like that. So in working with the studio, they were so elastic with me and so permissive and so supportive of all the things I wanted to do. But at the same time, they have their own set of sort of mandates and expectations and needs, right? And so I think what I got most out of this is that as an artist in a popular medium like this, because it's not painting, it's not poetry, it's movie making, where there's a lot at stake. And when I say a lot at stake, I mean there's a lot of money at stake. The idea that people need to join you on these things, you can't do them alone. A movie is not for one person. A movie is for everybody. And so the quality of what I learned and was most valuable for me, especially going forward, is this idea of you come at a project with the strongest possible approach. You come at the project with the most fixed concept of what you want it to be like, and you're as specific and deliberate and as mannered as you can be. And then you acknowledge that the audience needs you to just give them that much more that they want. And I think that kind of relationship between the filmmaker and the audience is what the geniuses have done the best. The stars of the industry, the Hitchcocks and the Kubricks and the Spielbergs and the Scorseses and the Wes Andersons and the Paul Thomas Andersons. There's the meeting place between the author and the viewer, and there's that place where you just lean in a little bit more towards what the audience needs, and it's such a rewarding thing when you find that connection. It's what movies are for. It's why we make them. We don't make them to screen them privately for ourselves on our couch. We make them to display for large groups of people to feel something. And so the benefit of being able to work for a studio with one kind of some part of my mind being on, are they going to get this? Is this clear enough? Is this what I mean? Am I being deliberate enough? Am I giving enough? Am I giving enough? It was really such a beautiful thing to learn, and I really look forward to doing the next thing, whatever that happens to be, with that in mind, because it's what makes a movie great.
Definitely, and I look forward to whatever you do next as well. But I really wanted to say thank you so much for being on today's episode, Osgood. This was a real pleasure for me, just to see everything that you've done so far. And I'm so thrilled that you were able to take this story and really translate it in such a beautiful and unexpected way. And I just appreciate you taking the time as well to speak with me. And thank you so much.
Anytime. Let's do it longer next time.
Yes, absolutely. And for those of you listening at home, you can find more on Corpse Club at corpseclub.com. For all your news, reviews, and interviews, you can head over to dailydead.com. And until next time, everybody, stay scary.